From the time she was a little girl, people stopped whatever they were doing when she passed. Women paused with baskets on their heads. Men froze with hoes in their hands. Children forgot their games and stared. It was not just that she was pretty. It was that her beauty was overwhelming, almost unreal, as if she did not belong to the same world as everyone else. By the time Osinachi turned 20, her name had become a song in Umuofia. Men argued over her in beer parlors. Mothers whispered about her in the markets. Young girls both admired and feared her. Even married men were not safe from the pull of her beauty. But Osinachi was not known for kindness. She was known for pride and for a heart as hard as stone. The sun had barely risen when Osinachi stepped out of her father's compound that morning. She wore a flowing wine-colored wrapper that hugged her tall, slim body. Her skin glowed in the early light like polished bronze. Her long hair was neatly braided, resting on her back like a royal crown. She walked slowly, not because she was tired, but because she knew people were watching. And they were. At the far end of Mofia, where the last mud houses gave way to bush and quiet footpaths, lived an old woman named Mama Nkiru. No husband, no children, no relatives. She lived alone in a small hut made of clay and thatch, surviving on what she could farm and fetch from the stream. Some villagers believed she was cursed. Others said she had once been a powerful herbalist before choosing a life of silence. Mama Nkiru rarely spoke to anyone. She moved like a shadow, early to the stream, late back to her hut. When people greeted her, she nodded politely and continued on her way. Children feared her. Adults pitied her. But no one truly knew her, and she did not seem to mind. That afternoon, the sun burned fiercely. The dust on the village road rose with every footstep. Osinachi had gone to visit a friend near the forest edge and was returning alone, swinging her arms lightly, her chin raised as always. At the same time, Mama Nkiru was coming back from the stream, a small calabash of water balanced carefully in her hands. Her back was bent with age, her steps slow. The narrow path could barely hold two people. When Mama Nkiru saw Osinachi approaching, she stopped. The old woman had heard the stories. She knew Osinachi was proud and quick to anger. Not wanting trouble, she stepped aside, pressing herself against the tall grasses. Osinachi passed. The old woman lowered her eyes, said nothing, and continued on her way. But then, "Hey!" The voice was sharp. Mama Nkiru stopped. "Did I tell you to go?" Osinachi turned slowly. The old woman turned back, confused. "My daughter, I did not disturb you." Osinachi looked at her up and down, her lips curling in disgust. "So, because you are old, you think you can just pass me without greeting?" The old woman bowed slightly. "Forgive me, I meant no disrespect." But Osinachi was not satisfied. She stepped closer. "Do you know who I am?" she demanded. Mama Nkiru remained silent. "I am Osinachi," the young woman said proudly. "When I pass, people stop. They greet. They show respect." The old woman's voice was calm. "Respect is not demanded, my daughter. It is given." Those words were like fire. Osinachi's eyes darkened. "What did you just say?" Mama Nkiru shook her head gently. "I am sorry if I have offended you." But Osinachi had already decided to humiliate her. "You see this old body?" Osinachi said loudly, so anyone nearby could hear. "This is what happens when a person is useless all their life. No husband, no children, no home worth looking at." The old woman flinched. Osinachi continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "You walk like a shadow. Nobody knows you. Nobody cares for you. Even death is probably waiting for you in shame." Mama Nkiru's hands trembled around the calabash. "Please," she whispered, "let me go." But Osinachi blocked the path. "Look at me when I talk to you," she shouted. Slowly, Mama Nkiru raised her eyes. and in them was not anger, it was pain. Osinachi laughed. Ha ha! See your face, wrinkled like dry leaves. If you had lived a better life, maybe you would not end like this. The wind blew softly. The grasses rustled. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Mama Nkiru straightened her back. Her voice when she spoke was no longer weak. Beauty without a good heart is a curse. Osinachi scoffed. Who are you to speak to me like that? The old woman took a slow step forward. You have been given much, child, but you use it to crush others. Today, you have chosen to wound someone who has done you no harm. Osinachi folded her arms. So, what will you do? Cry? Mama Nkiru looked directly into her eyes. No, she said quietly. I will speak. The air suddenly felt heavy. The birds in the trees went silent. Mama Nkiru raised her trembling hand. As you have used your beauty to bring shame to others, so shall it become the source of your suffering. Osinachi laughed. You think you can scare me with words? The old woman's voice grew deeper. You will know loneliness though the world desires you. You will taste hunger though wealth comes to you. You will weep for love, yet none will stay. And only when your heart learns humility will your burden be lifted. For the first time, Osinachi felt something strange. Not fear, but unease. She swallowed. You are mad. Mama Nkiru lowered her hand. I have spoken, she said softly. Then she picked up her calabash and walked past Osinachi without looking back. Osinachi stood alone. The wind picked up again. Birds began to chirp. Life returned to normal. She shook her head and laughed nervously. Foolish old woman, she muttered. But somewhere deep inside her, something had shifted. She did not know it yet, but the curse had already begun. That night, Osinachi lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. Her mind replayed the old woman's words over and over. Beauty without a good heart is a curse. She turned to the side. Stupid, she whispered. But when she finally drifted into sleep, her dreams were not peaceful. She saw herself walking through the village as usual, beautiful, admired. But in the dream, people stared at her with empty eyes. Men reached for her, but when they touched her, they turned away in disgust. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. She woke up screaming. Within days, the marks on her skin spread. Not ugly enough to make her unrecognizable, but enough to steal the perfection she had always known. Her suitors began to hesitate. Men still admired her, but they no longer spoke with certainty. Her friends started avoiding her. Some whispered behind her back. Osinachi returned home one evening, anger boiling in her chest. Her father looked at her with concern. My daughter, what is happening to you? She said nothing. She locked herself in her room and stared into the mirror. Fix this, she whispered to her reflection. But the mirror did not answer. Far away, at the edge of the village, Mama Nkiru sat outside her hut watching the sun set. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in many years, tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks. For the first time in her life, Osinachi woke up afraid of the morning. She lay still on her mat, staring at the roof of her room, listening to the distant sounds of the village waking up. Women pounding yam, roosters crowing, children laughing on their way to fetch water. Normally, she would rise with confidence, knowing the world would stop for her. But now, her heart beat like a trapped bird. Slowly, she turned toward the small mirror by her bed. What she saw made her breath catch. The dark marks had spread. Not like wounds, not like disease. They were strange, smooth patches on her once perfect skin, like shadows that did not belong. Her eyes were still beautiful, her lips still full, her face still striking. But the flawless glow was gone. And Osinachi knew this was not ordinary. She pressed her fingers against her cheek. "Go away," she whispered. Nothing happened. She slammed the mirror aside, anger rushing through her veins. "This is madness," she said to herself. "That old woman, she did something." For the first time in her life, Osinachi felt powerless. Osinachi wrapped herself in her finest cloth before stepping out of the house. She expected the same familiar reactions. She did not get them. At the first junction, two young men sat on a fallen log. Normally, they would jump up, greeting her, fighting for her attention. Today, they only looked. One whispered something to the other. They did not stand. They did not greet. Osinachi stopped in front of them. "Do you not see me?" she snapped. The men exchanged glances. "Good morning," one said awkwardly. Osinachi waited. Nothing more came. No admiration, no excitement, no fear. She walked on, her chest tight. At the market, women who used to call her name and offer her the best produce now watched from a distance. Some whispered, some shook their heads. She was too proud. God humbles everyone. Osinachi clenched her fists. She passed a group of girls who once followed her like shadows. Now they stared as if she were a stranger. One of them laughed quietly. The sound cut through her like a blade. She rushed home, and for the first time in her life, Osinachi cried. Not soft tears, bitter, angry sobs that shook her body. "Why is this happening to me?" she shouted into the empty room. No one answered. Among Osinachi's many admirers was a wealthy trader named Chinedu. He had been the most persistent of them all. He brought gifts, gold bangles, fine cloth, bags of rice, even a goat once. He had begged her father for her hand in marriage, promising a life of comfort. Osinachi had never given him a clear answer. She enjoyed his attention. She enjoyed knowing she could make him wait. That afternoon, Chinedu arrived at her father's compound. He wore his usual confident smile, but his eyes searched her face more carefully than before. "My beautiful Osinachi, I have missed you." She stood tall. "Then why do you look at me like that?" He hesitated. "Like what?" "Like I am something strange." Chinedu shifted uncomfortably. "I know you care for me," he said, "but people are talking. They say you are changing." Osinachi's eyes flashed. "And you believe them?" He replied softly. "I believe what I see." Silence fell between them. Osinachi took a step back. "So now you also look at me with doubt?" Chinedu sighed. "I only want to understand what is happening. Then leave," she said coldly. He looked at her, pain in his eyes. "I never thought you would speak to me this way. I have loved you even when you treated me like dust." Osinachi laughed bitterly. "Love? You loved my beauty, that is all." Chinedu opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He turned and walked away. Osinachi watched his back disappear down the road. Her heart pounded. For the first time, someone had left her. Not because she rejected them, but because something about her was no longer enough. She sank on the ground. Her fingers trembled. That night, the dream returned, but this time it was clearer. Osinachi stood in the middle of the village, dressed in the finest cloths. Her skin glowed again. Men knelt, women bowed, children sang her name. She smiled. She lifted her chin. And then the earth beneath her cracked. She began to sink. She screamed for help. No one moved. They only watched. As she fell deeper, she saw Mama Nkiri standing at the edge of the pit, her face calm, her eyes full of sorrow. "Why?" Osinachi cried. "You chose pride over compassion. You chose cruelty over kindness. the old woman said. Osinachi reached out. Help me! Mama Nkiri shook her head. Change your heart, then the chains will break. Osinachi awoke with a violent gasp. Her chest heaved. Her bed was soaked with sweat. She sat up shaking. The dream was too real, too clear. She buried her face in her hands. I don't know how, she whispered. As days turned to weeks, the curse did not stop at her beauty. Things began to go wrong in her life. Her father's business, which had always thrived, began to suffer. Buyers stopped coming. A shipment of palm oil spoiled. Money became tight. Her fine cloths tore easily. Jewelry went missing. Even food in the house seemed to disappear faster than before. One evening, Osinachi's father sat silently in the courtyard. Worry etched into his face. We are losing customers, he said. I do not understand it. Osinachi listened from the doorway. For the first time, she felt something close to fear. She who had never worried about tomorrow. She who had never known lack. That night, Osinachi went to the storehouse and saw that the yams were nearly finished. Her stomach twisted. The words of the old woman echoed. You will taste hunger, though wealth comes to you. Osinachi dropped to her knees. No, this cannot be my life. In desperation, Osinachi decided to seek help. Not from her friends, most of whom had abandoned her, not from her admirers, they now avoided her. She went to the village priest. He listened quietly as she explained everything. The encounter with Mama Nkiri, the marks, the dreams, the strange misfortune. He studied her face carefully. My daughter, he said slowly, some troubles are not cured by sacrifices. Some are born from the heart. What does that mean? Osinachi demanded. It means you must ask yourself who you have wronged. Osinachi frowned. I have wronged no one. The priest said nothing. His silence felt like judgment. She left in frustration. Next, she went to an herbalist in the neighboring village. He prepared potions, he drew symbols, he burnt leaves and muttered prayers. Nothing changed. The marks remained, the dreams continued, the loneliness grew. Osinachi returned home more broken than before. One hot afternoon, Osinachi walked to the stream, the same path where everything had begun. She moved slowly, her heart heavy. As she approached a narrow part of the road, a young woman carrying wood came from the opposite direction. Normally, she would step aside. This time, she did not. They nearly collided. Watch where you're going, the woman said sharply. Osinachi stared in disbelief. Do you know who I am? She asked automatically. The woman looked her up and down. I see who you are, and I will not move for you. She brushed past. Osinachi stood frozen. The world spun slightly. The ground beneath her felt unsteady. This was her life now. No one feared her. No one worshipped her. She had become ordinary. Worse, she had become invisible. That night, Osinachi sat alone in her room. Her father had gone to visit a friend, hoping for business help. The house was quiet. She stared at the wall, her mind empty. For the first time, she felt the weight of every insult she had ever thrown, every person she had shoved aside, every greeting she had ignored. She remembered the look in Mama Nkiri's eyes. Not anger, pain. Osinachi's throat tightened. I didn't mean to be cruel, she whispered to the empty room. But the room did not answer. She curled into herself. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Not angry tears, lonely ones. She realized then that she had never truly had a friend, never truly loved, never truly cared. Her beauty had always stood between her and everyone else. And now that it was fading, she had nothing to stand on. 2 weeks later, After another night of terrifying dreams, Osinachi made a decision. She wrapped herself in a simple cloth, no jewelry, no fine colors. She left her father's compound quietly and walked toward the edge of the village, toward the small hut of the old one. Her steps were slow, her heart pounded with fear. What if Mama Nkiru refused to see her? What if the curse could not be lifted? But something inside her whispered that this was her only path. The hut came into view, small, lonely, surrounded by tall grass. Osinachi stopped a few steps away. Her pride battled with her desperation. She swallowed and stepped forward. She raised her hand, knocked on the door. Silence. She knocked again. Still nothing. Her hands began to shake. Mama Nkiru, she called softly. It is me, Osinachi. The door creaked open. The old woman stood there, her eyes calm, her face unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Osinachi fell to her knees. Tears streamed down her face. I am suffering, she sobbed. Everything you said is happening to me. I have lost love. I have lost honor. I am losing even the little comfort I had. Mama Nkiru looked at her quietly. I warned you, she said. I know, she cried. I was cruel. I was proud. I did not see anyone but myself. I did not know what I was becoming. She lowered her head. Please, she whispered, tell me what to do. The old woman's eyes softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. Child, a curse born from the heart cannot be lifted by words alone. Osinachi looked up, fear in her eyes. Then how? She asked. Mama Nkiru studied her for a long moment. Then she said, you must walk the path of humility. You must serve those you once despised. You must learn compassion where you once showed cruelty. Only when your heart changes will your chains begin to break. Osinachi's lips trembled. Whatever it takes, I will do it. Mama Nkiru stepped aside. Then, she said, enter. Your journey has just begun. Osinachi rose slowly and stepped into the small hut. She did not know it yet, but the hardest part of her life was about to begin. The inside of Mama Nkiru's hut was nothing like the houses Osinachi was used to. There were no decorated walls, no soft mats, no smell of expensive perfume or burning incense. Only a small clay hearth, a low wooden stool, and a mat spread on the dusty floor. A single clay pot sat in the corner, half filled with water. Osinachi stood at the entrance, uncertain. This was not a place for a girl who once lived in comfort. Mama Nkiru closed the door behind her. Sit, the old woman said. Osinachi lowered herself on the mat. Her knees ached, her heart thudded. She waited for magic words, for prayers, for something to make everything return to how it was. Instead, Mama Nkiru sat across from her and said, from today, your life will no longer be about you alone. Osinachi swallowed. You will live as those you once despised. You will serve where you once commanded. You will greet where you once ignored. You will carry burdens that are not yours. Osinachi nodded. I understand. The old woman stood up. Then, tomorrow, you begin. Before dawn, Mama Nkiru shook Osinachi awake. Rise, she said. The day does not wait for those who sleep in comfort. Osinachi groaned softly and sat up. Her body felt heavy. The mat was hard beneath her. Her muscles ached from the unfamiliar night. Mama Nkiru handed her a battered clay pot. You will fetch water, she said, from the stream. Osinachi stared at the pot. Fetch water? That was work for children and poor women. Her pride stirred, but she remembered why she was here. She stood up, without jewelry, without fine cloth, only a simple wrapper. She followed Mama Nkiru outside into the early morning chill. The path to the stream felt longer than it ever had. When they arrived, Mama Nkiru pointed to the water. "Fill it," she said. Osinachi bent down, her knees brushing the damp earth. The water was cold. She filled the pot slowly, careful not to spill. When she tried to lift it, the weight shocked her. She staggered. Water sloshed over the edge. Mama Nkiru did not move to help. "Lift it," she said calmly. Osinachi gritted her teeth and tried again. Her arms burned, her back strained, but she forced the pot on her head. The walk back was torture. Her neck throbbed, her legs trembled. By the time they reached the hut, sweat soaked her wrapper. She dropped the pot and collapsed on the ground. Mama Nkiru looked at her down. "This is how many women live every day. Did you ever notice them before?" Osinachi shook her head weakly. "No," she whispered. After days of fetching water, sweeping the compound, cooking simple meals, and doing chores she had never touched before, Mama Nkiru gave Osinachi a new instruction. "You will go into the village and help where help is needed." Osinachi froze. "The village?" she asked quietly. "Yes." Fear crept into her chest. What would people say? What would they do when they saw her like this, stripped of pride, stripped of beauty? But she had promised. She stepped onto the familiar path. The same village that once stopped for her now barely noticed her. At the market, she approached an elderly woman struggling with a heavy basket. "Let me help you," Osinachi said softly. The woman turned. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Osinachi?" Osinachi lowered her head. "Yes, Mama." The woman laughed, a loud, disbelieving laugh. "So even you now carry baskets," she said. Other women turned to look. Whispers followed. "Is that not the proud one? What happened to her face? Is she cursed?" Osinachi felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she did not turn away. She lifted the basket. It was heavier than it looked. Her arms trembled as she followed the woman through the market. People stared. Some pointed, some mocked, but she did not stop. When they reached the woman's stall, Osinachi gently placed the basket down. "Thank you," the woman said, still shaking her head. I bowed slightly. As she turned to leave, a group of young girls laughed behind her. "See how the mighty have fallen," one said. The words cut deep. Her throat tightened, but she kept walking. One evening, Mama Nkiru served a thin porridge. No meat, no seasoning, just water and grain. Osinachi stared at the bowl. "This is all?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Mama Nkiru replied. "Eat." Osinachi obeyed. The porridge did little to satisfy her hunger. That night, her stomach growled. She lay awake, restless. She thought of many times she had rejected food because it was not good enough. She remembered mocking poor women in the market for selling cheap goods. Now she understood. Hunger is not weakness, it is suffering. The next morning, as she fetched water, she noticed a small boy sitting near the stream, watching her. His clothes were torn, his ribs showed through his skin. "Why are you sitting here?" she asked. "I am waiting for my mother," he replied. "But she has not come since yesterday." Osinachi felt something twist inside her. She remembered Mama Nkiru's words, "You will carry burdens that are not yours." She took a small portion of the food Mama Nkiru had given her and offered it to the boy. He stared at it. "For me?" he asked. "Yes," she said. He ate slowly, carefully, as if it might disappear. As Osinachi watched him, something in her heart shifted. For the first time, she did not see herself. She saw someone else's pain. A few days later, Osinachi encountered a woman who had once begged her for help. Her name was Amaka, a widow who sold vegetables. Months earlier, Amaka had asked Osinachi for a small loan to restock her stall. Osinachi had laughed at her. "Go and ask your husband," she had cruelly said, knowing the woman was a widow. Amaka had gone away in tears. Now, Osinachi found her sitting alone, her stall nearly empty. Her heart pounded. She approached slowly. "Amaka," she said softly. The woman looked up. Recognition flashed in her eyes, and anger. "You?" Amaka snapped. "What do you want?" Osinachi swallowed. "I came to say I am sorry." The word felt strange in her mouth. Amaka scoffed. "Sorry will not feed my children." Osinachi nodded. "I know," she said. "I cannot undo what I did, but if you allow me, I will help you." Amaka Sumidad studied her suspiciously. "You want to help me now?" "Yes." Amaka stood up suddenly. "Where was your help when I begged you? You humiliated me in front of others." People nearby turned to look. Osinachi felt the familiar heat of shame. But she did not run. She bowed. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "I was cruel. I deserve your anger." Silence fell. Amaka's shoulders shook slightly. Her eyes filled with tears. "You broke something in me that day," she whispered. Osinachi's own eyes burned. "I know," she said. "I cannot take it back, but I will not walk away again." Amaka stared at her for a long time. Finally, she said, "If you truly want to change, then help me carry my load today." Osinachi nodded immediately. She lifted the heavy basket without complaint and walked beside Amaka through the market. Some people watched in disbelief. The proud Osinachi was carrying another woman's burden. Something in the village began to shift. Osinachi worked. She fetched water for the elderly. She cleaned the compounds of those who were too sick to do it themselves. She helped in the market. She shared what little food she had. Her hands became rough. Her body grew tired. Sometimes she collapsed at night, too exhausted to speak. And still, the curse did not fully lift. Her skin did not return to her former perfection. Her life did not suddenly become easy. At times, frustration rose in her chest. One night, she turned to Mamankiro. "I am doing everything you asked," she said through tears. "Why is nothing changing?" Mamankiro looked at her quietly. "Because change is not a performance. It is a journey." Osinachi covered her face. "I am tired," she whispered. "So are many people who do not complain," Mamankiru replied. Osinachi lowered her head. She realized something painful. She had always wanted results without patience. Now, she was learning endurance. One afternoon, Osinachi approached a group of women at the market, offering to help carry their goods. One of them sneered. "We don't need your help," she said. "Go and show your fake kindness elsewhere." Osinachi froze. "I only wanted—" "Save it," another woman interrupted. "We know your type. You think people will forget who you were because you now act humble?" Their words struck hard. Osinachi stood there, unsure what to do. Her old self would have insulted them, would have walked away with her head high, but she did neither. She bowed slightly. "You are right," she said. "I cannot erase my past, but I will not stop trying to be better." She turned and walked away. Behind her, some women fell silent. They had expected anger, not humility. That night, Osinachi returned to Mamankiru's hut, exhausted. She sank onto the mat, tears slipping from her eyes. "I am changing," she whispered, "but people still hate me. They still remember who I was." Mamankiru sat beside her. "Forgiveness is not owed to you," she said gently. "It is something you earn with time and consistency." Osinachi sobbed. I don't want to be that girl anymore. I don't want to be proud. I don't want to be cruel. I want to be human. Mama Nkiru placed a hand on her head. That is the first true prayer you have ever spoken. For a long time, they sat in silence. And in that silence, something inside Osinachi broke. Not in pain, but in surrender. The next morning, as Osinachi washed her face at the stream, she noticed something. The dark marks on her skin were fading, just slightly. She leaned closer to the water. Her reflection wavered. The shadows were still there, but they were no longer as deep. Her breath caught. She touched her cheek gently. Could it be? She ran back to the hut. Mama Nkiru, she called. The old woman looked up. Osinachi pointed to her face. Look! Mama Nkiru studied her carefully. A small, knowing smile appeared on her lips. The heart has begun to change, so the body follows. Tears filled Osinachi's eyes. Not tears of pride, but tears of hope. The fading of the marks on Osinachi's skin gave her hope, but Mama Nkiru warned her not to rejoice too quickly. She said, "Do not mistake a sign for an ending. The path of change always asks one last question. Will you remain humble when pride is offered back to you?" Osinachi listened carefully. She no longer rushed to see her reflection. She no longer counted how much her beauty had returned. Her days were now filled with service, fetching water, tending to the sick, helping widows, feeding children when she could. But fate had one more lesson prepared. One evening, a messenger arrived at Mama Nkiru's hut. He bowed respectfully. "There is trouble in the village," he said. "A child has fallen into the old clay pit near the forest path. The pit is narrow and deep. The boy is alive, but no one can reach him." Osinachi's heart jolted. "How old is the child?" she asked. "About 7, the man replied. "His mother is crying. The men are afraid the pit will collapse if they go in." Mama Nkiru turned to Osinachi quietly. "Do you hear?" she asked. Osinachi nodded. "I will go," she said. People stared. "Are you mad?" someone shouted. "You could die." Osinachi remembered how she once believed she was too precious for danger. She remembered how she once thought the world existed for her. She stepped closer to the pit. "I will go," she said again. A murmur ran through the crowd. The child's mother looked up at her with red, desperate eyes. "Please," she whispered, "if there is any kindness in you." Osinachi knelt beside the pit. They tied the rope around her. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She took one last breath and descended. The pit was cold and damp. The walls scraped against her arms. Loose soil crumbled beneath her feet. She could barely see. "Hello?" she called softly. "I am coming." A small voice answered through sobs. "Please don't leave me." "I won't. I promise." She reached the bottom. The boy was wedged between the walls, his leg twisted, his face streaked with dirt and tears. She knelt carefully. "It will be okay," she whispered. She wrapped her arms around him. "Hold on to me." She signaled upward. The rope tightened. As they were pulled up, the walls shifted. Dirt fell. The pit groaned. For a terrifying moment, Osinachi thought the earth would swallow them both. She closed her eyes, not in fear, but in surrender. "If this is my last act, let it be one of love." The rope jerked again. Hands reached down. Strong arms pulled. Light flooded her eyes. And suddenly, they were out. For a moment, the crowd was silent. Then the boy's mother screamed with relief and ran forward, clutching his child. "My son! My only son!" She sobbed against him, kissing his dusty face again and again. People turned to Osinachi. She stood there, covered in dirt, breathing hard, her body shaking. Someone whispered, "She went into the pit." Another said, "She could have died." The villagers stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Not as the arrogant beauty, not as the cursed girl, but as a human being who had risked her life for another. The child's mother approached Osinachi slowly. Tears streamed down her face. She knelt. "Thank you," she cried. "You saved my child." Osinachi quickly knelt too. "Please don't kneel to me," she said softly. "I am not above you." The words stunned the crowd. Osinachi, who once demanded respect, was now asking for none. That night, Osinachi returned to Mamankiru's hut exhausted. She could barely stand. Mamankiru looked at her quietly. "You have chosen love over life itself," she said. Osinachi said nothing. She simply lay down, too tired to speak. Sleep took her immediately. And this time, the dream did not return. She slept deeply, peacefully. When she awoke at dawn, something felt different. The air seemed lighter. Her body felt free. She walked to the small mirror near the wall and froze. Her skin was clear, smooth, radiant. The dark marks were gone. But it was not the same beauty as before. This beauty did not feel like a crown. It felt like a gift. Her eyes filled with tears. She turned to Mamankiru. "It's gone," she whispered. The old woman nodded. "The curse has ended," she said, "because the heart that created it no longer exists." Osinachi dropped to her knees. "Thank you," she said through tears. Mamankiru shook her head gently. "Do not thank me," she said. "You saved yourself." Osinachi returned to the village, not in fine clothes, but in a simple wrapper. Yet, when she walked, people noticed, not because of her beauty, but because of what she had become. Women greeted her, men nodded respectfully, children ran to her without fear. The same people who once whispered now spoke her name with wonder. That is the girl who saved the boy. She has changed. Truly, people can be reborn. Osinachi stopped in the market. She saw Amaka, the widow she had once humiliated. Osinachi approached slowly. Amaka looked up. Their eyes met. "I heard what you did," Amaka said quietly. Osinachi bowed. "I am still learning," she replied. Amaka studied her face. Then, slowly, she smiled. "For the first time," she said, "I see a woman, not a queen." Osinachi returned the smile, and it was the most beautiful smile she had ever worn. Days later, Osinachi returned to Mamankiru's hut with food and water. The hut was empty. The mat lay neatly folded. The clay pot was gone. Only silence remained. Osinachi's heart skipped. She searched the surroundings. No sign of the old woman. Confused and afraid, she ran back to the village. No one had seen Mamankiru. Some said she had simply walked into the forest. Others said she had never truly belonged to this world. Osinachi returned to the hut at sunset. She stood in the doorway. "Mama," she whispered. The wind stirred the tall grass. For a moment, she thought she heard a voice. "Live with humility. love without pride. Tears filled her eyes. She bowed her head. I will, she promised. Osinachi did not return to her old life. She chose a simple one. She helped widows in the market. She taught children who had no one to teach them. She cared for the sick. Her beauty remained, but it no longer ruled her. People no longer stood just to admire her face. They stood because they respected her heart. One evening, as she walked through the village, the same path where she had once humiliated Mamankiru, she stopped. She looked around. She remembered who she had been and who she had become. She knelt on the dusty ground, not in shame, but in gratitude. Years later, mothers would tell their daughters, beauty is a gift, but character is a crown. And elders would say, there was once a girl named Osinachi. The whole village stopped for her beauty, but it was when she learned humility that the world truly stopped for her. Osinachi herself never spoke of her past with pride. When people praised her, she simply smiled. And when they asked how she changed, she would say, I was broken so that I could be rebuilt. Moral of the story: true beauty is not in the face, but in the heart. Osinachi learned that pride can destroy what gifts cannot protect, and that humility, kindness, and compassion are what give life real meaning. When we use our advantages to look down on others, we lose our humanity. But when we choose love, service, and respect, we are truly transformed. In life, character outlives appearance, and a changed heart can redeem even the most broken past. Thank you for watching this story till the very end. If Osinachi's journey touched your heart, remember, true beauty is not in the face, but in the heart we choose to build. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Until next time, stay kind, stay humble, and never stop believing in change.